Hi everyone, I'm Julie from Quilty Desires. I have a super fun project for you to make today. It's quick and easy and I bet you don't make just one. It's called the Market Day Sewing Pouch. This is a great little pouch for taking with you on the go. If you're traveling, you can put a hand sewing project in there, and it's also great for you to take to sewing class. I'm using fabric called Mushroom Blooms, and it's designed by Jill and Rani for Poppy Cotton Fabrics. Let's go ahead and make this pouch. For the project today, you will need an 8.5 by 22 inch piece of main fabric, an 8.5 by 22 inch piece of lining fabric, an 8.5 by 22 inch piece of wadding, snap clip, and a fat quarter to make the bias binding. Now, if you don't have access to a snap clip, you can also use Velcro. For the project, the tools that you're going to need to use today are a patchwork ruler, a rotary cutter, scissors, a measuring tape, an erasable marker, some pins or clips, basting spray, your hand press, and also a 1/4 inch foot, which has a little guide on the side of it and looks a little bit like this. And also, you'll also need a walking foot for this project because you're going through 3 layers of thickness. The first thing we need to do is we need to make our bias binding from our fat quarter. As I said earlier, if you would like to learn how to make continuous bias binding from a fat quarter, I will leave the link for that video in the description box below. Once we've made our bias binding, we're going to get on with quilting the pouch. So the first thing we need to do is we need to place our lining wrong side facing up. Then we'll place our wadding directly on top of our lining, and then we'll place our main fabric directly on top of the wadding. Using basting spray to baste your project together is a really simple and quick method. Of course, if you would like to use pins, you're more than welcome to do so. But for this project, I'm just going to use some basting spray. So the first thing I want to do is I want to peel the top layer of my main fabric back and just give a little bit of a spritz, and then smooth it out nicely on top. Turn it around, and then I will give this side a little bit of a spritz and smoothing it out towards the outer edges and just making sure that your main fabric is lined up directly on top of your wadding. Then we'll flip it over and we'll repeat the same process with the lining fabric. The next step is to quilt our pouch pieces together. Now for this one, I'm just going to use some really simple straight line quilting. I'm not going to get too fancy on this, and I'm going to do the lines a 1/2 inch apart. So to do that, I'm actually going to find the middle of the pouch. Now the pouch is 8.5 inches wide, so the middle will be 4.25 inches, and I'm just going to make a mark at the 4.25 inch line, at the 4.25 inch mark, and from there I'm going to make a mark a 1/2 inch either side of that, and that will give me my first line to rule. So first line just like so, and then from then I'm going to use my ruler to just mark out 1 inch increments and draw a line the whole way along the pouch. And I'll do that until all of the lines are drawn. Now we're going to start quilting our pouch pieces together. So just starting in the middle and working your way towards the outer edge, we'll start with our first line of quilting. next thing I want to do is to create the curved top of my pouch. So to do that, I'm just going to take a trusty bowl from the kitchen and I'm going to pop that into the corner and mark the curve. You don't need anything fancy to make those marks, just a simple bowl or plate will do. And now we're just going to trim to make the top curve of our pouch. Okay, next we want to make our pocket pieces. So from here, we'll measure down 10 inches to create the body of our pouch. And then from that point, we'll mark down a further 7 inches to make our first and second pockets. Now take your ruler and make a cut on those lines to create your 3 pieces. So you will have your main curved piece, which is 10 inches long, your first pocket piece, which is 7 inches long, and your second pocket piece, which is 4 inches long. Now, if you're thinking that's a pretty stingy 4 inches, it is. I actually made a mistake in my cutting and I cut it to 3 inches. So please don't do that. It's definitely 4 inches on the pocket, like this one. Next, we're going to bind our pocket pieces. This is where you need to decide how you would like your pouch to look. In this pouch, I've actually used the lining piece as a feature on the pouch, but in this one I've made sure that all the pieces are the same facing. So for this one I'm going to make it exactly like I have this one, and I'm going to flip the lining over and make the lining the front of the larger pocket piece, and I'm going to make the main fabric the feature of the second pocket piece. So I'm just going to lay those out and make sure that it looks the way that I want it to, and then I'll pop that aside and we'll get ready to bind these 2 pieces. We're going to bind along the top edge of each of our pockets, and to do this we're going to grab our binding and we're going to attach the binding first to the back and then we'll flip it over to the front. So measure out the piece of binding that you want to use. I'm actually going to cut this a little bit longer because I don't want to use the join of the fabric. So I'm just going to snip that off. And I'm going to lay that down on my first pocket. And I'm going to leave maybe about 1/2 inch. And then we'll pop some clips on to hold that in place. You can use pins here as well. And now I'm going to grab my second pocket and I'm going to measure the binding and attach it from the back. Again, I'm just cutting the join of that binding off. So about 1/2 inch over on either side and making a cut, and then just popping our clips or our pins on. Now the way we want to put our binding onto our pocket pieces is we want to make sure that the raw edge of the binding is sitting at the top edge of the pocket. Now we'll take these over to the sewing machine and we'll stitch that down along the top edge there with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to pop the 1/4 inch foot onto my sewing machine now because we want to sew our binding on with a 1/4 inch seam. So the 1/4 inch foot looks a little bit like this. It has a guide on the side, and that's where you rest your fabric to make sure that you get a nice 1/4 inch seam. Take your pockets to the ironing board and press the bias to the front of the pocket. You just want to line the folded piece of the bias up with the stitched line on the pocket. So when you're pressing your bias to the front, this is the stitched line that you used to attach the bias on the back. So when you're ironing your bias to the front, you just want the folded piece of the bias to line up nice and neatly with that stitched line. Just like that. And then you're going to pop. The next step is to lay our pocket pieces on top of our main curved piece, and then we're going to base that down. So large pocket piece first, small pocket piece next. Pop some clips in to hold it together. And then we'll take it over to our sewing machine and we'll baste that together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now just be really careful when you're basting together because we do have 3 thicknesses to get through, so take it easy, take it slowly, and you'll definitely get there. Now I'm ready to baste these layers together. I'm just going to start my sewing here at the top of the binding. Now that we have our pouch pieces basted together, we want to attach the binding. So flip your project over, we're going to attach the binding from the back. Once again, place your bias binding raw edge to the edge of the pouch And what we want to do is we want to leave a little bit of a tail. So I've got joins there that I'm just going to snip off. So I'm going to leave about that much of a tail, and I'm going to start my sewing about 1 inch in from the edge of the pouch. So I'm just going to pop my clip on there, and I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to start attaching the binding. So the pouch is going under the machine, and I'm just going to start 1 inch from the bottom edge and sewing towards the corner. I'm actually going to stop about 1/4 of an inch from the corner, and with my needle in the down position, I'm going to lift my foot and rotate the pouch so that it's on a 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to sew directly into the corner. Take the pouch out, fold the edge up and make a crease, then fold the binding back down on itself, just like that, and then we'll start sewing again at about 1/4 of an inch in and reverse to the edge of the binding, and then continue sewing down the edge of the pouch. Once we get to this next corner, I'm going to stop again about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge, and I'm going to sew with a 45-degree angle directly into the corner of the pouch. Snip the threads, fold the binding up, make a crease, bring it back down on itself, and repeat the process. The reason we use bias binding on this project is because bias binding is stretchy, and it'll be able to get around the curves of our pocket super easy. So just go super slowly around the top of the pocket, making sure that the edge of the bias binding is aligned with the top of the pocket. Don't need to pull on it too much. You don't want to stretch it out of shape, but you just want to really place it on there and guide it. So I'm just going to stop right there at the top of the pocket, and next we're going to join our two pieces together. We have a right tail and we have a left tail. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your left tail and place it on top of your right tail, and then you're going to make a mark 2 1/4 inches from the edge of your right tail. So we've got your left tail sitting on top of your right tail. We'll make a mark 2 1/4 inches from the edge of the right tail, just like this. Now in quilting and sewing circles, a lot of people like to trim their binding off at 2 1/2 inches rather than 2 1/4, and that's okay. If you feel comfortable doing that, then by all means go ahead and do that. I like a nice tight fit for my binding, so that's why I make my mark at 2 1/4 inches. So once you've made your mark, snip your tail off. Next, take your left tail, open out and flip up. Then take your right tail, open out and place directly on top of your left hand tail. Take a pin and pop your pin in from the left hand side diagonally through to the right hand side. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky because there's not a lot of room to sew here, so I'm just going to get a little peg and peg those two pieces together. It kind of acts like a third hand. So here we are back with our binding. Now we want to rotate our piece 45 degrees, just like so. So now our pin is going from the top right hand corner to the bottom left. And what we want to do is we want to sew diagonally across the pin from left to right. Now, if you need to mark a line to do that, then by all means go ahead and do that. But I'm just going to eyeball it by sewing from that top left-hand corner to that bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so under our needle we go. It can get a little bit fiddly. So we're just going to sew across that needle or where we made our mark earlier. So from one corner to the next corner. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to test that and make sure that we've got that joined in the right direction. So open it out and there we go. Perfect. So now you can snip those tails off and you can just leave about 1/4 inch. And then we'll flatten those seams out. Snip off any threads. And we can just join the bias where we left it. Next, we'll iron our bias to the front. And we'll flip the pouch over and press the bias down along that 1/4 inch seam line that we made earlier. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to cheat a little bit, and instead of using pins or clips to hold my bias binding on, I'm just going to use a little bit of school glue. Now this one is washable, so it will wash out of your pouch, and it's also safe to use. I only use a small amount, so very sparingly, just dabbing it on. It works pretty much like a foundation paper piecing glue would work, like a fabric pen or Roxanne's basting glue. It would work the same as that. I don't have any of those to hand, so that's why I'm using my school glue. So I'm just going to heat set that and iron my bias in place. Now we're just stitching our bias down. The very last thing we have to do now is to attach our snap clip. So what we want to do is we want to find the middle of our top pocket piece, and that'll be 4 1/4 inches. So we'll just pop a mark there, and we'll make sure that it's 1 inch down from the top of the bias section. And then according to the manufacturer's instructions, you will attach the bottom section of your snap clip. And then we're going to do the same with the top of the pocket piece. Again, measuring to find the middle, 4 1/4, and then measuring down 1 inch from the edge of the bias, making a mark, and attaching the top snap clip. Just like that. Of course, if you've got Velcro, then you'll just sew the Velcro on to the pocket piece and the top here. But for now, there you have it. Your sewing pouch is complete. So that's the Market Day sewing pouch. I really enjoyed making it, and I hope you enjoy making yours too.